4, 3, 2, 1.
So the title of our article is Social Cohesion Among Kin, Gene Flow Without Dispersal, and the Evolution of Population, Genetic Structure in the Killer Whale. To put that much more basically, it kind of means how social habits affect mating and the consequent effects on gene flow and eventual evolutionary gaps it could cause in the killer whale.
The authors of our article are M. Pilot from Poland and the UK, M. E. Dahlheim from Seattle, and A. R. Holtzel from the UK as well.
So we can think about the whales as people, and their three ecotypes or races are residents, transients, and open ocean orca whales. The residents stay close to the shore, don't really travel as much, and eat only fish. And an example is salmon, just like Olivia was talking about yesterday in her project. Transients, they travel a lot. They're the cross-country orca whales, and they rely heavily on the marine mammals. Open ocean, because it's such a vast area, they have to move around a ton, and also they pretty much just eat whatever that they can find.
Killer whales by nature are generally very social animals. They're actually in the same family as dolphins, and like dolphins, they love to swim around, breach, they play. Like I said, they're very social. They're even known to be social with other animals outside of their species, particularly resident whales. They swim with other dolphins, porpoises, lions, and sea lions. Transient whales, on the other hand, don't do that. They usually swim at those animals since those are their prey. Being the social animals that they are, killer whales tend to live in pods, and in these pods they generally live under the rule of philopatry. This means that if a whale is separated from its pod for any reason, it tends to go back to its pod. This includes dispersion, and dispersion is when a male leaves the pod for a number of reasons, and one of these is mating. However, like I said, when a male disperses, it is very likely to go back to its original pod. The social structure and breeding habits of whales play a very significant role in the genetic makeup of these whales.
Basically what that means is, or put it into layman's terms, it would be as if two people from the different race, same as humans, if they were to crossbreed, then you would get the same results as if you would as a human. So
the pods are their families, so they generally tend to mate outside of their pod. What's interesting to note, though, is that depending on what type of whale they are, whether it's a resident or a transient or an offshore, they tend to only mate with a like species. So resident usually only would mate with the resident, a transient would only mate with the transient. However, offshore and transients do have a higher connection because, as it shows in the cluster analysis, offshore whales are kind of along the same branch as the transient whales. Their genotypes are more closely related than the residents and the transients, or the residents and the offshores.
Okay, mitochondrial DNA. In this experiment, the scientists extracted this mitochondrial DNA from the orca whales from the outside of the nucleus, which made it easier for them to extract, which is why they used the mitochondrial DNA. And what they found from it was that most of the gene flow was inherited from the father, which is different from the mitochondrial DNA of humans, because in humans, the mitochondrial DNA showed that the gene flow came from the mother.
The reason that scientists use mitochondrial DNA is because they're able to track back through the lineages of different species. And this is particularly important in our case because the orca whales have separated genetically, and using mitochondrial DNA, they are able to trace back and kind of determine when and how those different splits occurred. This is illustrated very well in the cluster analysis, and you can see very clearly how the offshore and the transient orca whales are very closely related, while the transient and the resident orca whales are more distant.
The cluster analysis chart will be shown on this PowerPoint.
Wait. He's right.
Discussion.
Relatedness plays a large role in social cohesion, and it also keeps killer whales from mating within their own pods. This is illustrated very well because when pods come across each other, they tend to mate with each other if they're in the same ecotype. And by ecotype, I mean whether a whale is a transient, whether it's an offshore, or whether it's a resident.
After conducting the experiments, scientists took the data that they got and plugged them into logarithms, and these logarithms helped to explain how the data came about.
Along with these logarithms came other programs, which we don't have time to discuss, but all of those programs kind of melded together, and the results are shown in the principal component analysis. The principal component analysis will be shown on this slide.
In conclusion, the mating system is highly selective, and mainly the mating was outside of the pod, but restricted to the ecotypes. Also, genetic structure was enhanced by pickiness, and the matings that were outside of the ecosystems were due to generally long distances, desperate orca whales that couldn't find mates that were geographically close to them, so they had to expand and go and find a mate.
While orca whales are considered to be one species, their social habits and their breeding habits have led to different gene types. Because they only breed within the same ecotype, the gene pool has kind of dispersed off, and they've almost become so different genetically that they could be considered different species.
Yeah. In conclusion, scientists pretty much said that orca whales are racist. They stay and mate within their ecotype, and the only time that they go outside their ecotype to mate is when they're desperate. This causes a genetic division that will continue to develop and could lead to different species later on.